In this scene, I'll be using two warm shades and a cool, dark indigo. First of all, I wet the sheet completely again. Here, I don't go around the sun, but around certain areas that I want to leave dry. Here, I'll work directly across the entire sheets, wet on wet. I go over it with water several times. For painting, I again take a flat brush 25 millimeters wide. I start with warm shades in the sky, mixing raw sienna. Here, I could even add just a tiny drop of ochre to make the area around the sun even warmer with a yellowish glow. I go around the sun right here in this corner. Then I start spreading the shade towards the edges and a little further from the sun. I can mix into this shade a little bit of benzimidazolone brown or burnt sienna. I want to make the sky a little brighter in the photo reference. It's almost white, but here I still want the painting to be more colorful. I can go lower with this shade. First, lay down a warm tone in the field, and then later we'll add the dark tone of the shadows there. In these studies, the most important thing is the consistency of the paint. If you pick a color with the right consistency, you'll create both a sense of volume and a sense of illumination and depth. If the tones are too close with no dark middle and light, then the drawing can look flat. But right now, we'll practice the skill of picking just such a tone. So I've gone over it with a light warm shade, and now I start painting the actual objects, the trees in the background. Right here, I mix a thicker, more substantial color. I mix a warmer color near the sun. Again, raw sienna, benzimidazolone, brown, and I add just a tiny bit of indigo. Just a touch, but still near the light. I want to make the trees warmer near the sun. This feeling of lighter, warmer objects next to the sun always creates the effect of illumination, greater volume, and that bright radiance of light. And then I move on to darker shades to a denser tone. Here, don't be afraid to add more indigo, let it do its work. I separate the trees from the field and create a kind of complex, slightly uneven silhouette of the forest. Here, our trees go beyond the format, that's fine, but somewhere I still leave gaps of sky. It looks lighter, more intricate with the gaps. Maybe right here, raise a little tree just a bit. I'm not copying the photo reference, I'm just inspired by it. I take from it the moments that seem successful and interesting, but I boldly change some things according to my own judgment. Because most often for an artist, a reference is simply a source of inspiration. This is very important to remember. And to stop trying to copy a photograph exactly. First, I lay down warm shades, those sunny ones that we might perceive here near the sun. And then I'll go over it with dark shadows. Now I would darken the trees just a little more. Let's add the darkest shadow. I know that my paint will still lighten up as it dries, and taking that into account, I'm now laying down an even darker tone wet on wet. They will look even more three-dimensional that way. And now I start working with shadows right here, mixing raw sienna and indigo to get this greenish shade which we see in the photo reference. I keep mixing the three shades and their combinations to get beautiful, complex color variations. Here, I can also lay down a darker tone and now I want to add the effect of fog I'll created using water. Okay, I rinse the brush in water and blot it just a tiny bit so that water doesn't just pour off it. And I add strokes of fog. While the paper still has moisture, the water pushes the pigment, creating beautiful watercolor effects, those very blooms and backgrounds which we love so much. Here I can put more on the side of the light. Here the watercolor might behave unpredictably, something might run downwards or spots might appear. But in this case, I like it. I don't want to correct the watercolor, let it paint by itself here. During this time, I'll also darken this corner just a tiny bit. Here I can use it really dark indigo because we have the darkest shadow away from the light. And now I want to spatter the painting a little to create the feeling of glowing little flowers and spikelets natural phenomena that will add to the feeling of light and volume. I take a fan brush and I knead clean water. It's better to flick off the large drops that form initially onto a napkin, a draft sheet, or the palette, and then work with finer spray on your drawing. These wonderful glowing effects appear, which I love very much. They always look extremely light, expressive, and cool. I use them often. I think we can stop here. Now it's better to wait for the work to dry on its own. Because when we dry it with a hairdryer, the tone fades very strongly. I've noticed this effect many times. Most likely, the pigment goes deeper into the cotton paper under air pressure. The pigment sinks deeper and the color becomes lighter. That's why I prefer to dry the work naturally. But if you're in a hurry to finish faster, you can use a hairdryer without any problem. After the tonal underpainting has dried, I will add strokes with a thin brush, introducing lines into the scene. I'll work initially with a very light color mix. Again, raw sienna, a drop of reddish brown, and I start from the side of the sun. Add little spikelets towards the light first, then later add accents and dark tones where there is more shadow. Here, I want to step away from the photo reference and raise these spikelets above the fog to the forest level so that, compositionally, my work isn't divided into fog with field and forest with trees. So boldly add spikelets at this level with strokes. First, we work with the light color. We create the feeling that some spikelets have reached the sun and are lighter there. Since my forest is quite dark, the light color won't be visible, so we'll need to add a darker shade. The strokes can be made darker too, the little stems themselves. Here, it's important to make confident lines in a single brush stroke so that it looks light and natural. If you're still struggling with confident, even lines, it's better to practice on a draft sheet. Draw these spikelets and then add them to the scene. Always do that when you're unsure about a technique. I'll add a little here too. Add little leaves coming off the stems so our rhythm isn't just diagonal lines, but has contrast in another direction. Don't overdo it. Any technique is good when there isn't too much of it. I'll always say this. When there are too many spikelets, it becomes overloaded, boring, and heavy in the lower part. Always step back and check if it's enough or if you can add more. I think I'll do a little more spattering for unpredictable spots and rhythms, then stop with the spikelets. Spattering works with any brush, even an ordinary round one, as long as it has enough color. I mix the three shades again, yellow, red, and blue, and spatter this dark tone on the field. Better to cover the sun and sky so splatters don't fly there, but even if they do, it's no big deal in a study. Near the light, you can take a lighter shade and spatter with that. I think that's enough. If later it seems there are too few spikelets, I can always add more with a dark tone. That's not a problem. But it's better to stop in time so as not to overload the work.